Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio Podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, a man for whom getting stuck in traffic was the only thing worse than sticking around for day one of nationals, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. All too often, gun owners and gun culture are portrayed in the worst possible ways in the media. This podcast aims to counter that narrative by shining a light on the members of gun culture who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, while IDPA members make up just a tiny fraction of the overall gun-owning public, I think they're a representative cross-section of that demographic. From all walks of life, rich, poor, and in between, young and old, men and women, patriotic, caring, friendly, and outgoing. And this podcast is about them. Today you're going to meet one of these awesome people. But first, let me tell you about Shoot Steel. Founded in 2008 by an IDPA competitor, Shoot Steel is the industry leader in steel targets. Static targets, gongs, target stands, reactive targets. If you or your club need steel targets, go to unloadpodcast.com/steel and check them out today. And when you buy, we'll earn a small commission to help keep the lights on here at Unload and Show Clear. So go to unloadpodcast.com/steel and order today. All right, time to get on with the show. Here is today's special guest. Our special guest this week is Chris Schmied from Hernando, Mississippi. Chris, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us a little about yourself, where you're from, what you do in Hernando.
I am a digital marketer here in Hernando. I'm a freelancer, so I do a lot of website design, social media consulting, SEO work, things behind the scenes to help websites get noticed.
Well, tell us about your home club.
My home range is just south of here, still in North Mississippi, in a town called Como, Mississippi. It is a one-exit town right off I-55, and we have a lovely range there. It is a members-only range, but we do have pistol matches on the weekends, Steel Challenge and IDPA, of course. We host those every fourth Saturday. And my husband, Will, if you've met me, you've probably met Will. He is the club contact. The range members primarily are made up of rifle members, but there are a few of us pistol shooters around that keep things going. So the majority of the range, you'll notice, is dedicated to rifle shooting, but we have some nice pistol accessories as well. So we shoot down there as often as we can. It's just 20 minutes from our house, so get down there as much as allowed for. And we love it. We want to encourage more shooting in North Mississippi, more pistol.
Very cool. Yeah, I made the trek from North Texas. It's like, I want to say it's an 8-hour drive to Como for the 2015 match was the first time I came out.
Yeah.
And it was totally worth it. I sweated off like 10 pounds because you decided to have the state match in July.
Well, we've learned. We got smarter. We were ambitious. What can I say? We got smarter, and we realized that not everybody handles July in Mississippi as well as we do.
That's right. It gives the hometown crowd a competitive advantage, right?
This is true. We know how to hold guns in the heat. We're good.
So, how did you, as a woman, as a web designer, a tech person, how did you get interested in guns? Did you grow up around guns? Did your family teach you about them? Is that something you picked up later?
It is. It's ironically something I picked up later. I'm a military brat, and Dad was a Marine who later joined the Air Force. So there's some neat things there. Yeah. But he was a Marine in Vietnam. And then came back and did the officer training thing and went into the Air Force. And he's always had guns around the house, but I was never really interested. And, my family, my mom's side of the family, they were hunters. But again, if I was drug out to a deer lease, I was miserable and made sure everybody knew it. So I was not into that. And I wasn't interested when Will and I got together. He's always been interested, and he grew up around it. And he tried to get me interested at first. I wasn't really down with it. It wasn't until I really started working full-time in Memphis, where crime is a thing. And yeah, and then I started taking night classes at one of the local colleges in Memphis, and I was just a nervous wreck, constantly being alone at night in Memphis, downtown Memphis. It was not a good environment. So I said, I know you've got a handgun. I'd just like to learn to shoot it. And I don't think I'd learn well from you, because I know him well enough to know, just oil and water that way. So I said, I want to take a handgun class, just one. And we did. And I took a class at a range that's no longer operating in Memphis, but they were pretty well known. And I'm sure they had wonderful instructors. We just didn't get that guy. And we got a gentleman who was not very nice to me and the other woman in the class. And by nice, I don't mean he had to bend over backwards for us, but he brought out the guns we were shooting with were Glock 17s. That was what everybody in the class had. And I said, look, this doesn't really fit my hands well. Could I try another gun? And he said, honey, if you can't shoot that, you shouldn't be shooting. Those were his exact words, an NRA instructor. So I passed the class. Everything was great. And even Will spoke up and said, he was like, dude, just let her borrow. You guys have rental guns. Let her have one. What is the problem here? And I got through the class and everything was fine. That class, though, inspired me to become an instructor myself, because I said, nobody should go through that. So it was a few months. Yeah, it was a few months later, or as long as it took for me to get my NRA membership in line and everything else in line and figure out myself with some guns. I took the instructor course and became an NRA instructor and started teaching predominantly women's classes, and then shooting pretty regularly. But I mean, this came to me way later in life. I mean, I was 40 before I ever picked up a handgun. So as a kid, I think they tried to teach me to teach, and I was probably okay with a rifle. Handguns, not so much. No.
It's that whole explosion right in front of your face thing.
I know, but now I'm like, people, it's funny too, because I've got friends who just aren't into guns. And I go, how many do you have? And I'm like, we just don't talk about that. We don't, shh. Yeah, it's that one class was like a gateway drug. It was, yeah.
So where did you get the interest to compete? So how do you go from having no interest in handguns to this guy's ticked me off enough that I'm going to learn to become an instructor myself, to getting involved heavily in a competitive shooting sport?
Great question. Well, we live in North Mississippi, and we do live out in the county, but it's still frowned upon to shoot on your own land, unless you've just got miles and miles around you. So we started looking for a good place to shoot, other than driving up to Memphis for indoor ranges. And yeah, so we kind of wanted to look somewhere closer to home. And of course, we just hit the Googles and it said there's this place called DeSoto Rifle and Pistol Club. So we checked into that, and at the time it did look very just rifle, and that's not us. But we wanted to go check it out. And Will's idea was the best way to do that would be to go to one of these open to the public pistol matches. He got hooked right away. He became an IDPA shooter, I think, his first go around. I took a little more convincing. I was not interested in competing. He went without me, and then he was like, you got to come. This looks great. So I went, but I just went to take pictures of him doing it. I was just going to be his groupie, and it was going to be fine. And then it became one of those things. Every time I went, though, the local shooters kept encouraging me to shoot. They were like, you got to try it. You got to try it. So it was one of those things where I commented that this stage looked fun. I don't even remember the stage. And somebody said, well, you've got to shoot it. So I just, with their permission, with everybody's encouragement, after a quick safety briefing, they let me use Will's gun and just sort of from low ready, run through the stage. And I was hooked. Mm-hmm. It was over. It was I think it was a few months later, I'm shooting my first sanctioned match. It was that. It was that fast. So, and of course now I'm just fully hooked. I'm constantly, I also run a Girl and a Gun chapter locally, and I'm constantly just, you guys have got to come to IDPA. IDPA is where it's at. Get to IDPA, so.
So do you remember that first, after you got the bug, Do you remember the first match that you shot for yourself where you had your own gear and your own gun? Do you remember that match?
I do. I mean, I know it was a local club match. I couldn't tell you who I shot with beyond Will and a couple of other guys that I remember were there. I was a nervous wreck. And I was, I mean, I had all this great gear. Will took me out shopping, decked me out from head to toe. I had a Glock 34 that I was shooting with. I had wonderful pink accessories, and I tweaked out the gun. I was a full tilt diva, and but I remember just being very nervous. And I remember all the guys I shot with. I was the only lady there that match, and all the guys I shot with agreed to let me not shoot first. I didn't shoot a single stage first. I was that one, and
Right.
yeah, didn't mind going second, but I just wasn't. I wasn't ready to go first, so. I watched everybody run through, and I think probably for that first 6 months, whatever the guy in front of me did, that's how I shot it. I had to just get
Right.
through, okay, whew. And you do the thing where, that first stage, you've got the jitters, and then I would be fine. But that whole first match, I was just a nervous wreck. I didn't want to do anything wrong. I was really worried about embarrassing myself or embarrassing Will, and, I wanted to, I felt confident being safe because I had shot at that range plenty, but I just wanted to make sure that, I didn't trip and fall or embarrass myself, or who knew. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember I had fun, or I would not have gone back.
Right. What was the first sanction match that you competed in?
I don't remember which match it was. I'd have to ask Will. He can remember off the top of his head, I'm sure. But it was a ton of fun. It was right after that we started shooting, or we started running stats for people. But
what year was it? Do you remember?
It had to be 13 or 14.
Okay.
And just remember I was, again, a nervous wreck all over again. But I also did the thing where I learned pretty quick that if I'm not having fun, I'll quit. And I know a lot of people think that's silly. If I'm just flat out miserable, I'll DNF.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to,
Yeah.
The odds of me doing it at a match I paid $100 for is rare, is slim to none. But at
Right.
a club match, if I'm miserable because it's too hot or it's too cold or I'm just not having a good time for whatever reason, I'm out of there. But, or I'll just sit and watch Will because I can have fun doing that too, just, evaluating him. But this was a match, and it was a long day match, and it was hot, and I was not all that tickled to be there. But I went and got through it, and everything was pretty okay till the end when things started going a little south, and I think a stage got thrown out. Which happens.
Yep.
But it was my first sanctioned match, and it happened. And of course, that was it for me. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm never shooting sanctioned matches again. This is the worst. And Will was like, calm down, lady. This happens. It's no big deal. This is just a thing. We weren't SOs, so I didn't know any better.
Okay.
And I heard all the grumbling, and I was just like, I'm done with this. I hate this sport,
You hadn't been to
but of course I
Badlands
didn't.
yet.
I had never, no. And that was the other thing too. So then I started talking to a few people online about it on Facebook, and they were like, oh, please, that was nothing. You ain't seen nothing yet, lady. If you think that was bad, so I kind of got over that real quick, and then we started realizing too that sanctioned matches, unless you live in Texas, I think you guys are super blessed there. The rest of us don't have a sanctioned match every weekend. That's within a 5-hour drive.
Right.
So, the ones you can get, take them. They're so few and far between. You have to enjoy them. And I learned at least that first year that at least down here in the South, they are kind of seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can work your work schedule around something great in the spring or fall, that's heaven. You take it.
Oh yeah.
So I've gotten a lot better now about scheduling my matches and knowing, when we should get somewhere. Back then we were doing the thing too, where we would drive to that range, even if it was 3 or 4 hours away, we would drive to it the morning of and drive home right after.
Yeah.
And that's just miserable. Yeah.
Yes. Done that.
So we've learned, yeah, you've done that. Yeah. So we've learned now that, look, if it's further than this far away, we hotel it.
Yes.
Especially the night before.
Yeah. I'm almost 50. I did, was it last year? Yeah, last year I did Oklahoma. I did Oklahoma that way. That was not a good idea at 48. I was like,
that's crazy.
that was so much easier when I was like 30 or 25. Not even possible now.
I can't even imagine trying.
It takes 4 monsters and yeah. So now you and your husband Will are running matches. You're doing providing the electronic scoring. You're running the scoring shack for a lot of matches. How did that come about? How did you get started doing that?
That's one of those things where it kind of worked out where, so I do digital marketing, which means I know a little bit about computers. Will is in IT, and he's like the head of something that's over my head at St. Jude. But he does IT stuff at St. Jude. So he's kind of a computer genius, and it became one of those things where it was one of the matches in Arkansas where they asked us if we would help out the stats, and that was Mountain Valley. And we said yes. And they were like, wow, stats went really well. Both of us are a little OCD, and we have very methodical thinking, and that works out well in a stat shack. Mm-hmm. Whether you're a paper or iPad, someone's got to be the control there. Mm-hmm. And we did the thing too where people had never, I don't know, how common this was or how often this was happening. We check and double check.
Right.
Every score sheet that comes through our stat shack, one person enters it, and then it goes in someone else's pile for them to double check. So they were like, wow, scores came out so fast, and I don't know that they've ever come out that fast before. So we were really hitting it, and it just worked out to where at our next match, because of course it was like the very next year, we hosted our first sanction match. And we just worked out a system. Everybody gets these barcodes, and we started working with Tim at Uber and Uber Scoremaster to really, sort of streamline the process of getting every shooter their own barcode that's unique to them and the stage, so that with the right barcode scanner, which we got on Amazon for like $10, you can scan it and it goes right in the exact right place. And so if you're going to do paper scores, that's the way to go. And we just have a streamlined process where we can travel with our own totes and printer now and have scores, run and done and out within a few minutes of last shot. I think our best time is 9 minutes after last shot. We had scores posted.
Wow.
Yeah, our worst is probably, and our average is probably 20 to 30 minutes after last shot, only because we're still getting scores entered at that point, and someone still has to double check them before we can run reports.
30 minutes is still quick, though. I mean, that's...
Yes. I want to be stapling scores up while people are just sitting down to eat. That's kind of how... Because then they don't bother me, too. That's kind of I have a process. But yeah, that's kind of how we like to run it. So if we can get scores coming in at a good clip all day, we don't get behind, and then that's totally doable. And then, of course, it became a thing where we did it once for somebody, and then another match director said, oh my gosh, I heard you did this. We do it every time for Plato. Mm-hmm. We just love Mike Plato at Cussa. And if he's going to run a match, we'll do stats for him. He doesn't even have to ask. He just has to let us know where to be.
Yep.
And somebody else said, oh, I heard you did it, and I heard it went well, and would you come do it here? And then it became so now we go to Louisiana, and we go to Arkansas, and we do our own, and we did Memphis this weekend. And so, I mean, nobody's called me and asked me to fly to Colorado or anything crazy like that for some bazillion-dollar range.
Right.
Maybe someday, I don't know. But I mean, all over the Southeast, where they know we travel and we have no problem getting to and from, will definitely help.
Very cool.
If they need us.
You have a hearing issue that makes regular conversation sometimes difficult, and I didn't even know this about you until later when we were talking. We had met back in 2015, and I had no clue. How does it affect you in terms of shooting a match and dealing with a safety officer? And what can other people who have hearing loss issues, how can they mitigate those problems and not worry about them during a match?
I love that you ask. I'm what they consider late deafened, meaning I was raised, I had hearing all my life. There was a few incidents when I was a much younger adult that started me losing my hearing, but it wasn't until I was 40 that I was diagnosed with severe hearing loss and had to start wearing hearing aids. Mm-hmm. And in one-on-one situations with my hearing aids in, I'm fine. And that's why I still talk, pretty... I did go to speech therapy for a bit, but I talk pretty okay. Not so much that anyone would notice, unless I'm wearing my hair up and they can see my hearing aids, something like that. Right. But I try to hide it, but I'm also not like in your face, unless we're Facebook friends, Right. But at a match, it gets interesting. So I am a safety officer.
Mm-hmm.
But I almost always just do scores with Will. So it never really comes up except at club matches. And I just let people up front know, I'm going to read your lips and your body language and know what you're saying if you're facing me. If you're not facing me and you're yelling my name, it's just never going to happen. So you got to tap me on the shoulder.
Right.
How it works when I'm the shooter, though, and I can't hear buzzers. Just can't. I've had people test it and put it practically up against my ear with no hearing protection on, and I just can't hear that frequency. But if you tap me on the shoulder, I'm going to start shooting things. If you tap me again, I'm going to stop shooting things. So those are kind of they're a stop and go for me. And I just tell every SO I come across, could you just please tap me on the shoulder? There's a provision for it in the rule book. Just, people with hearing loss may need other than audible starts and stops. So just tap me on the shoulder. You can tap me with the buzzer. You can tap me with your other hand when you hit the buzzer, whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. I just need some sort of physical contact to let me know to start shooting. And I've rarely had issue with an SO not accommodating my needs. I let them know up front. I'm not bashful about it.
Right.
And they all they want to do whatever helps me. I've even had them go, well, surely I'm going to tap you after the buzzer's gone off, so it's going to cost you time. And I'm like, I'm fine. If I'm not upset about that, no one else should be either.
Right.
So it's okay. Yeah, I'm just here to have fun.
So that's the provision for those who are interested in doing something like this, but are concerned about their hearing loss issues. The provision is, or the best way to deal with this is to have the SO actually physically touch you to let you know to stop and start.
Yes, that would be my recommendation. That's what works for me.
Gotcha.
And I've told other SOs, because they've asked me, I know sign language, but not everybody does. And I don't expect an SO to,
Right.
If you do and you want to sign, groovy, I can talk back. But if not, all I expect is that you would give me some sort of physical start. And if you touch me, I'm not going to mistake that for anything else. Now, I've had one incident where it was SO interference. He touched me, and I'm sure a hearing shooter might not have stopped. I didn't. He hit my elbow. He was a little too close behind me when I went to open a door. Mm-hmm. I stopped. That was it for me. I thought I was done. I thought I'd done something wrong. So I immediately started. I was ready to unload and show clear. And he was like, "Why did you stop?" And well, you told me to, sir. So I got to do that one over. But no, that's only happened once. And like I said, for the most part, even the SOs that are just curious about my loss and they're like, "Are you sure you can't hear this?" I'm like, I swear, did you do something? I don't know. So just tap me. It'll be fine. And I've told them to tap me on my shoulder, on my elbow, on the back of my head. However you have to get my attention, if you need to get my attention because I'm being unsafe, get it. I will stop for you, I promise. So, because you can yell ceasefire all day long and nothing's going to happen.
Before we wrap this up, tell me what it is that hooked you and keeps you coming back and makes IDPA so special for you. What is it about it that you're so passionate about?
That may be hard to explain. It's one of those things where, because I've shot the other sports, the other pistol sports that don't have the vests, and they're supposed to be so much more fun. But I really do like the scenarios. I really do like the fact that you have to do some analytical thinking. Like I said, my first few matches, I was terrified of just falling down. I did not do any kind of special analytical thinking. Now I'm the one during a stage brief asking questions. Can I do it this way? Mm-hmm. Do I have to stand here? Where can I re-engage? I love the fact that there's there's a few different ways to shoot a stage, and that is interesting to me. I like watching other shooters shoot the same stage a different way to see what works better for someone else. I'm cross-eye dominant. Maybe shooting from the left doesn't work for me the way shooting from the right would, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting to see all the little nuances, and I think I only get that out of IDPA.
What's one thing that you would tell a new shooter, particularly a female shooter who's thinking about guns or thinking about IDPA, or maybe their boyfriend or their husband is trying to encourage them to come out? What would you tell them to convince them to come out and try IDPA?
That really everybody's goal, from the novice shooter, and this is their first club match, to, all the masters there. They're all there to have fun. At the end of the day, none of them paid money or got up early on a Saturday morning to be miserable. They all just want to have fun. So if you remember that they're there to have fun too, and don't be scared to ask them questions or advice, you'll have a great time. Just relax and have a good time. That's all that matters.
All right. Chris Schmied, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much to our special guest for coming on the show. If you know somebody in the IDPA community who deserves some recognition, I'd love to talk to them. Send me an email at Lloyd, L-L-O-Y-D, at unloadpodcast.com. Check out the show notes for today's episode and listen to past episodes at unloadpodcast.com. And if you like what you hear on the show and you'd like to support us, help keep the lights on, pay the bills, we would love your support. Visit patreon.com/unload and make a small monthly contribution to help continue what we're doing here. Tune in again next week for another edition of Unload and Show Clear.